Story 1. I was 21 when I had my first boss in America. He was Asian American. I had never seen an office like his and noted the absurdity. He would get free potato chips from a guy in a company truck and stuff his cheeks in the middle of telling me what to do. He always offered some. He fired a coworker who screamed racist things at me by simply yanking her out the door. He called another coworker a cub or a baby lion because she was tiny with wild, unruly hair. He would do a small roar whenever she was about to report for her shift or when I mentioned her name. He would run around the office wearing a wig while imitating me. He brought his daughter to work and gave her piggyback rides in the office. He asked me to take videos. He sometimes spoke to black coworkers in an exaggerated way, saying "What's up, shorty" to the women and "What's poppin'" to others. He called some of the men Tyrone and would say an exaggerated expletive in what he thought was a convincing black voice. He asked me to teach him random Arabic words so he could yell them sporadically in the middle of the day. He usually got the accent right. He had an open-door policy and would take shots in his office. He started a small chicken farm in the back of the building and gave out whole chickens to the staff. Once he had me and a coworker try to slaughter one. I couldn't do it. I nicked it slightly and shrieked, spraying all three of us with blood. City inspectors told him he could not keep chickens in back. He was walking the main floor with a small basket of freshly laid eggs just as they were asking for him. He did the chicken farm again the next summer, this time with a small garden growing squash, cucumbers, and corn to disguise the chicken coop. He happily gave out vegetables along with chicken. He was extremely proud to take a tray of his eggs home to his children. He ate 2 fresh eggs every morning. He bought a wok to use at work to deep fry sausages. Sometimes he made lunch in the back. The entire floor would smell like food and he would gather all 3 of us in his office to eat. He would regularly fall asleep under his desk. The snoring was so loud you could hear it in the front. Once a client asked what that noise was and I said it was the plumbing. He woke after naps looking puffy but acted as if nothing had happened. He would immediately go next door for a cherry Coke. He constantly ate hard candy to stay awake during the day. He ate too many edible cannabis products at a party I hosted once and passed out. He told me to hire someone, but when he saw the woman he made a comical expression. Raised eyebrows and wide eyes, like Ken Jeong, because she had trouble fitting into her chair. She was a larger woman. He removed chairs the next day because they encouraged us not to concentrate on the client. The woman was a no-call, no-show the following week. He had a love-hate relationship with a groundhog and never managed to catch it. Once he threw a cricket at me from the opposite end of the office. He and another coworker kept straight faces. I convinced myself the cricket had flung itself at me. At the end of the day, I watched the cameras and saw them do it. I am still traumatized. He still has an office full of the strangest collection of things. A few feathers from favorite chickens that he had since consumed, each named and dated, a rabbit paw someone gave him, a goat's hoof, and a framed quote I told him that had been told to me by a very high homeless person. I don't remember the rest. It's an odd place to go into. He had a hard time growing a beard and would ask me what I thought of the progress of his soup taster. He was the nicest boss I've ever had, well-meaning, if a little racially insensitive and genuinely fascinated by other people's cultures. He would buy different cuisines for us to try each week. He gave bonuses because he knew the job didn't pay much, which was always a nice surprise. He paid my former coworker when she had to stay home during her husband's COVID-19 illness. He loves llamas, alpacas, and baby goats. When I showed him how to use Reddit, he would almost always send me an alpaca photo. I still get a photo now and then. Even 3 years after I left, he still sends me photos of his illegal farm and recently asked me to post his cucumbers on Reddit. I forgot to add that he once fell into a poison ivy bush and did not realize it right away. He ran around screaming until we sat him in his office, partly undressed, and put medicine on his wounds. He was miserable for days. It was hard to watch. Once he dove headfirst into a wall while asleep and needed 3 stitches for a busted lip. He came to work that morning with a huge lip and had to explain himself all day. We joked that his wife was beating him up. He still insisted on snacking as usual. At one point he sipped ketchup through a straw. Story 2. I had a boss who spent all morning locked in his office. He asked me to come in after lunch and showed me a handmade graph. He explained that it was a chart of every sexual encounter he had had in his life. See, it is blank until I joined the army. Then I went to a sex worker here. Then they sent me to Vietnam, where sex workers only charge $2 each time. That's where you see the big jump. I served 2 tours, but then I was shot in the face. I came back home, and you see how it just drops to almost nothing. I was astounded. Story 3. My boss is very Michael Scott-esque. When I first started, I was essentially Pam because I was both the receptionist and his assistant. My favorite story is from when we were prepping for a conference. Some context. He is terrible with the English language and mangles phrases and descriptions. On a group call, he kept talking about wanting a golden hamster ball for giveaways. He raved about how great it would be spinning around while people walked by, and everyone on the call sat in confused silence. By that point, I had become so good at decoding his nonsense that I knew he meant a gold raffle cage, so I sent him an image privately asking if that was what he had in mind. To this day, he says I can read his mind and must be psychic, and he still calls it a hamster ball. Overall, he is a pretty nice guy and a solid boss. He hired me based on a gut feeling and has been decent to me ever since. I knew it would be a good fit when, during the interview, he tried to describe the company's 4 pillars and forgot one. He later told me that the missing pillar was knowledge. Story 4. He wanted a pomegranate for lunch, and they were out of season. But that did not stop him from sending me on a quest to every grocery store in town in search of a pomegranate. Multiple produce clerks laughed at me, but that was the easiest $13 per hour I have ever made. Edit, wow, this blew up. Rather than replying to each of you, I will say it here. No, I did not find a pomegranate, and when I came back he was eating at Subway and he seemed to have forgotten that he had even sent me. I could have gone home or to the movies, but I did not know. Driving around leisurely listening to the radio seemed like a pretty good alternative to doing my actual work at the time. I did, in fact, check the gas station in Carbondale. They also did not carry pomegranates unless they were in season. Story 5. I had a red-headed boss who made us all sit down and watch a training video about how we should not refer to him as Ginger because it is bullying. No one had ever called him that. Story 6. I used Michael Scott as a reference point for an old boss of mine from the moment I started working there. He regularly made Chewbacca noises because a coworker's name vaguely sounded like Chewbacca, though it did not. He used voice to text loudly in his office to send personal messages, got excited and wore a specific vest anytime we had after work outings, shouted the same 7 references to old movies and awkward hip-hop song quotes many times a day, and insisted on greeting our international coworkers loudly in their languages, then looking for approval and giggling at everyone's accents on conference calls. He also told me about an improv show he had done for a year long after it happened. That said, he had the good parts too. He never hesitated to go to the mat for any of us whether we deserved it or not. He gave sage business advice and clear examples of how to face unexpected challenges. He came to every community play I did in the 4 years I worked for him, told everyone in the office how good I was for the following month, and chastised them for not coming. When things got serious in my life, he was kind, helpful, and supportive. Honestly, he was probably the best boss I will ever have. Story 7. I had a boss who was very peculiar. For instance, he would open a random closet, look at the items inside, and then go on a tirade. Look at all this. Who bought all this junk? I would say, you did. He would reply, oh, well, somebody needs to throw it away. This happened all the time. Story 8. I had a boss who used to watch me through a gap in the glass partition between our desks. She wanted to see whether I was paying attention during meetings. One day, I put a large folder over the gap, and she became very upset. I still laugh when I remember it. Story 9. I've never worked for one myself, but my dad told me a story about his boss, who gave awards to everyone based on how long they'd worked there and made a speech for each person. When a woman received her award, he told the story of how she came to work there and said, at first I didn't want to hire her because she was so hot. My dad doesn't work there anymore, but I love that story because I will always picture Michael Scott giving Pam a Dundee and saying that. For those asking, I am Big Tuna's distant cousin, enlarged tuna fish. Story 10. I once worked for a family company, not my family, where my boss often had loud fights with her husband, mother, and sister, whose addiction led her to steal. I have a million stories about that workplace, but one that stuck out to me is this. Once, for someone's birthday, my boss decided it would be fun to buy an anatomically correct male inflatable doll. She brought the doll into the office, inflated it, and dressed it in a construction vest. When I walked by, my boss was trying to manipulate the position of the inflatable penis and asked me if I wanted to be the fluffer. Story 11. My rude boss insisted his daughters be flower girls in my wedding. I declined. At the reception, he told me I was spending too much time talking to one person and that I needed to work the room more. Story 12. He held a meeting with our whole team except one person to discuss that person's sexual orientation. We had known for well over a year and never made a big deal of it. So yes, they are out there, and that is why the show is so funny to me. I can relate. Story 13. I had a boss who would stop us in the middle of our work to hold company-wide meetings about conspiracy theories regarding the September 11th attacks and chemtrails, even though we were a furniture-making company. He became so caught up in those theories that he forgot to order wood for a month. Story 14. I had one boss like this. These are a few quick stories. 1. During my interview, he asked me how much I weighed. 2. Once he was considering selling the company to a Japanese firm. While walking them around the building, he was heard saying, "We really bombed the hell out of you, huh?" 3. He got on the intercom and interrupted everyone by yelling for someone to bring him the football team schedule. 4. I have video of him telling a very cringy joke during a sales meeting. You can see at least one person covering their face in embarrassment. 5. Once he told me to call his assistant and have her bring him a bag of coffee and his 5-pound dumbbell. 6. He had a secret facelift. He was mysteriously gone for 3 weeks and came back with a beard. 7. I ended up with a box of pictures from the 1970s showing an exotic dancer giving him a lap dance in the conference room, same furniture. 8. Once I watched his business partner go down the potluck line, tasting everything with the same fork. At the end of the line, he stuck his used fork into the cake. I have not eaten at a work buffet since. It lasted 5 years. Once he got new patio furniture and sent the guys from the shipping department to assemble it at his house. Orders did not go out that day. He had a huge closet where he hoarded random junk. He was a total pack rat. His wife would not let him keep junk at home. I was looking for something one day and found a box labeled watches with dead batteries. He saved an entire box of watches that he knew did not currently work and that he knew how to fix, but instead he just kept them in a box. Story 15. My brother had 2 bosses at his first job who fit this description. They were an elderly married couple who owned the gym across the street from us, probably in their 70s when he started. The wife was from Germany and very strict. The husband was clearly losing it. Notable incidents include the husband combining bleach and ammonia to clean the hot tub and sauna, exposing my brother to the resulting fumes. The wife insisting the street be swept once a week, which was my brother's task, only for the husband to come out halfway through with a leaf blower and undo any progress. The husband regularly sitting in the sauna for too long and needing to be rescued by my brother and coworkers, and my brother opening the gym every Saturday without being given a key, so he had to hop the fence to get in. There are many more, but he is asleep now and I cannot ask him. Story 16. Yes, I had one. I organized a thoroughly awkward award ceremony that we never did again. He asked a Mexican employee if his new baby's name was going to be No Mas during the baby shower we threw for him. He heard me use the phrase economies of scale and then used it incorrectly 5 minutes later in a different conversation. He did not know the meaning behind Black Friday or what it meant for a company to be in the black. Just like Michael Scott, only more of a jerk. Story 17. Long ago, my 80-year-old boss pulled me into his office. "Boss, Paul, I've noticed that your shirts come untucked and that looks unprofessional." Me, "I'm sorry about that, Joel." "Boss, I want you to start tucking your shirts into your underwear." Me, "Boss, go ahead and try it now." Me, "Joel, you know I have 15 women who report to me. I can't undo my pants in the office." Boss, sure you can. He drops his pants. He is 80 and wearing Spider-Man underwear. This is also the story of how I went to work at Oak instead. Story 18. I worked for a woman as her personal assistant and cat sitter. She was extremely wealthy and unstable. She had me order a mannequin online and then paid me to take one of the mannequin's legs to Nordstrom to see what suitcase would fit the dismembered mannequin body because she wanted to fly with the mannequin to Pittsburgh and display it as her daughter, dressed in her daughter's clothes, at her daughter's graduation. Buying the mannequin was a whole ordeal. She kept trying to get me to order from adult doll websites because she did not understand. I found it ridiculous. Story 19. My boss used to carry a backpack full of hammers. If you fell asleep at your desk, he would start banging a hammer on your desk until you woke up. Then he would autograph the hammer and give it to you as a gift. Story 20. I had a manager at my previous job who really tried his best to be everyone's best friend forever. He loved giving pep talks and thought he could raise our abysmal morale by being Mr. Positivity. Morale was low because we were always buried in work and paid poorly. He would crack jokes, randomly burst into song, and sneak up behind you to yell, "You were doing a great job." Unfortunately, he was also very incompetent at his job. He relied heavily on a junior colleague for help with technical tasks. They practically did his whole job for him, and he spent days working on paperwork that should have taken an hour or two. If you had a problem, his answer was usually either to stare blankly until you left or to say, "Think positive and it will work itself out." The thing I hated most was that whenever people applied to work at the company, he would print out the stack of resumes, sit at his desk, and read aloud the parts he found funny. He would laugh at people for working at McDonald's or other fast food places. He loved finding grammar mistakes and making fun of them. If someone had a cringy objective statement, he would guffaw over that too. He did this loudly in an open office so you could not avoid hearing it. That definitely lowered morale as well. Story 21. I worked with a genuine Michael Scott, that is, a nice, well-meaning person who did some absurd things. We had kidnapping drills one day to learn how not to be kidnapped. This was a regular office in a boring suburb. There was no reason kidnapping would be on anyone's radar. He and several of the men randomly broke into a push-up contest, again in a white-collar office with middle-aged men in khakis. He could not remember the nationality of our colleague. He tried to learn Spanish to make her feel special when she returned from maternity leave. What he learned was not Spanish, and she was from Portugal. She knew only 5 words of Spanish. He disappeared for 4 days with no call or email and did not respond to our attempts to reach him. Finally, someone drove to his house to make sure he was alive. He was fine. He had forgotten to tell us he was taking the week off and then lost his phone in a lake. There were many moments like these. He was a great boss who genuinely cared about everyone in the company and had occasional moments of brilliance when he really got things done. But, oh my goodness, so many moments of ridiculousness. Story 22. We had an anonymous feedback program at work. Our boss was livid with the results, particularly because several comments said he frequently lost his temper in meetings and yelled at us. The more he insisted the comments were incorrect, unfair, and hurtful, the angrier he became. He finally pounded the table and shouted that he did not scream in meetings. Okay? Story 23. My manager had aspects of Michael Scott, but the sad, pathetic, and unfunny ones. A couple of examples. He called an all-staff meeting to announce his divorce. He then instructed our receptionist to lie to his soon-to-be ex-wife and deny he was ever in the office. He was very incompetent at his job. If a task was too big or complicated, he would not do it. He would not ask for help. He would move on and leave the issue to fester. I had to constantly monitor and follow up with him to get things done that affected my job. His writing read as if he used a thesaurus heavily, with many superfluous words inserted to make him sound smart. When he was terminated, he kept the corporate laptop and cell phone. After several strongly worded letters requesting their return, he drove back to the office, parked on the edge of the road on a busy rural highway, and had his teenage son carry the items across the yard and parking lot to deliver them. I was eventually tasked by senior leaders to coordinate his termination. They then gave me his job in addition to my previous one. I can do both within a 40-hour week with no problem. Story 24. This might be too late, so it may get buried. My boss at a pizza shop in high school was out of control. 1. He made raises into a game and handed them out for odd reasons. He liked the table my friend got that held the credit card machine, so my friend got a raise. Another coworker was playing with a penny at the end of the night, kicked it into the air, and it landed in a hat someone was holding, and he got a raise. I won an election to be the first person listed on the timesheet, became number 1 according to him, and received a raise. 2. He overate and loved gluttony. He constantly asked if we wanted lunch and became irate if we declined. He brought 2 sandwiches with a pound of turkey each, 5 granola bars, 5 fruit snacks, and 2 Gatorade drinks. That lunch was frequent, and if we did not eat it all, he was angry. He once drove an hour during our shift to get pizza he claimed was the best in the state. People who did not try it were shunned that day. He bought 100 tacos from Taco Bell and forced an eating contest for lunch. He was thrilled when someone ate 7 and nearly vomited. He paid a worker to eat a bag of dog treats and filmed it. It became an after-work event. 3. After a closing shift, he returned from the casino having won $4,000 playing poker. He demanded we go to the strip club and drink with him. We were 18 at the time. 4. He never trained anyone and expected everyone to know everything about the pizza place. We always had to hire and train people while he just sat there. 5. He loved online poker and often played during shifts. His desk was in the middle of the store even though he was not supposed to have one. He played poker during the 5 p.m. Friday rush and left us to run the store, often saying, "Can you get the register? I'm in the middle of a hand." My friend drove past the store at 1 a.m. multiple times and saw him sitting inside playing poker with all the lights on. We often found the store unlocked with ovens running in the morning because he left after poker binges. His wins or losses set the tone. We got used to him not working and having to close the store because he was so dialed in. This was in 2007 when phones were different. He loved text bombing people. He would force workers into a circle and make us furiously text someone not at work until we had collectively sent about 400 texts. He would laugh and cackle, peck at his BlackBerry so fast, and scream with laughter. He also started fights with every restaurant around us. His order might be slightly wrong, and he would storm over and start arguments until he got a refund. If I said I was going to get lunch somewhere, he would not let me leave because he hated the owner or was fighting with them. Eventually, all restaurants within a mile were off-limits. About 20 places he had picked fights with. He was well known and nobody ever fought back for some reason. We had to order food from across town if we actually wanted someone to serve us because he had pissed everyone off so badly. Story 25. I had that boss for a year and he was awesome. If he was in the middle of a story and the phone rang, he would literally say, "Let it go to voicemail." If a customer called 5 minutes before closing, he would insist I let it ring and go to voicemail. He was late more often than I was. He frequently bought us coffee. He always took our side in customer disputes, and if a customer yelled at us or became abusive, on the phone he would call them back, argue with them, and tell them to order from someone else. He told us that if weather conditions were bad, he did not care how late we were. He only cared that we were safe. Sometimes he would tell me on random days to take a 2-hour lunch. I was salaried and did not punch in or out. He was great and gave me so much free stuff. We used to call him Michael Scott behind his back. Unfortunately, the owners were stricter. Another coworker and I were fired, and our boss was demoted. It was fun while it lasted. To clarify, my boss took our department and customers seriously and stayed on top of the numbers. He knew that happy, well-cared-for employees are likely to produce more. We worked in a very stressful environment, so when we needed to relax a bit, he led us and often recommended it to keep us sane. Upper management were slave drivers and disliked that we laughed so much. They thought that if you were having a good time at work, you were not being productive. I was very productive because my boss took care of me and made it fun to come to work. Story 26. My mother's boss was the head manager at an office job in suburbia, with a number of employees and functions similar to the office depicted on the television show. He was in his late 40s at the time and invited himself to my mother's birthday party at our house. It was basically just my siblings and a few family friends meeting up to play cornhole and chat for a couple of hours. He arrived in pastel blue shorts, a pink polo, and flip-flops, carrying a case of natural light. He got very drunk by about 9 p.m. and started yelling at everyone. He saw a couple of our neighbors, younger men, drinking next door and took the liberty of inviting them over. Eventually, he ended up in a wrestling match with one of the neighbors in the living room, finishing it by lifting the neighbor up in the air and body slamming him directly onto our coffee table. His final act of the evening was defecating in his pants in the kitchen and passing out on the linoleum. Story 27. While I never had a boss like Michael Scott, I did have a boss like Ron Swanson. He was completely no-nonsense and humorless, and at times seemed like a real hard-ass. He spoke in abrupt, clipped sentences or often abstained from speaking. Once he left the store for the day, he was unreachable by phone or email. Any mail for him arrived at the store or at his post office box. The store was in a strip mall. I would regularly arrive at work to see him repairing the building, repaving, or filling potholes in the parking lot. When the store was robbed and he was tied up by the criminals, he tried to stop them and was shot in the head. Fortunately for him, it was a ball-bearing gun. Unfortunately for the robbers, it made him angry. He broke the chair he was tied to but also broke his collarbone in the process. He body-checked one of the men through a display case, then bit the other man until he dropped the gun and they ran away. His name was Doug, and he was the best boss I ever had. Story 28. Yes, they are everywhere. I have had a few. One would only approve time off if you fed her ego. Her boring stories had to seem like the most fascinating thing you had ever heard. She would come into the office, spin around in a new outfit, and we had to pretend it was amazing. I worked every weekend for months until I started playing along. Story 29. Absolutely. Here are some gems from my previous boss. He hired a private investigator to follow his number 2 because he thought that person was having sex with his wife. He thought I was having sex with his wife at one point. He had his number 2 follow me and then confronted me when he found out I had hugged his wife. She had been the manager at a fast food restaurant where I had worked and had gotten me the job at the plant. I was 18. She was 50 and a mother figure to me. He loved a joke where he insisted I would not get paid because I forgot to clock in or out. He waited until I was convinced and threatening to quit before laughing and saying he was just fooling to teach me a lesson. He would pretend to fire me for no reason other than his amusement. He told me to clean my hands so people would not think I was black because he said they did not employ black people. Despite widespread use of computers, he did all calculations by hand. At the chemical plant, he calculated ingredient weights on a 10-key calculator, often making mistakes and always blaming the person making that batch. When I was a student, he threatened to fire me for missing work to take finals. He lectured that, if I wanted to be successful like him, I should throw myself into the job and work my way up. I am a first-generation college graduate and nearly quit school because of him, but I quit the job to attend school full-time, finished my Bachelor of Science, went to graduate school, and have been a professor at a great school for 4 years. He would order 6 burgers from McDonald's and a salad for lunch, eat the burgers in his car and the salad in the office, while telling everyone he was on a diet. He was morbidly obese. Writing it all out, it seems made up. I guess Michael Scott's character really isn't too far off from some of the craziness that makes its way up the ladder. Story 30. The boss I had at that company was not like Michael Scott. He looked a lot like Homer Simpson. The company itself felt like Dunder Mifflin. I had just watched The Office and thought, no way this happens in the real world. Because I had only worked in professional places until then. Then these things happened. The general manager had a daughter who was a drug addict and he hired her, even though company policy forbade hiring relatives. It was not his company. The daughter fooled around with truck drivers who stayed overnight. She fell in love with one who was married. He said he would leave his wife for her. The wife became pregnant. The daughter once showed up to work drunk and trashed the office. A sales employee accused the human resources manager of having an affair with the general manager. There was a lot of yelling. A woman called and told me to connect her with the general manager. When I asked her name, she said, "I'm his lover. He will know." The general manager later called to clarify that the woman was not his lover. The general manager's daughter liked to flirt with sales representatives. Even though she was married, she started sending explicit messages using the company phone we shared and blamed them on me. When I showed the phone to my manager, he downplayed it. That same daughter became pregnant by one of the production bosses who was about 35 years her senior. He was married with 4 children, she was married with 2. They now live together with all their children plus 1. 2 workers were on a ladder without helmets or protection. One almost fell. The other saved him but fell headfirst and suffered severe neurological damage. 2 months later, the man who had almost fallen hanged himself at the company, out of guilt. Only after that did the company buy helmets. The father of the young man who hanged himself continued working at the exact spot where he had found his son. A marketing worker once told me in front of the human resources manager that he would climb through my window at night and rape me. The human resources manager giggled and said, "Don't let him catch you." I was once yelled at over a missing check I had not touched. The check was later found at the bottom of the general manager's daughter's desk drawer. Expired. An older man negotiating with the marketing manager kept insisting on taking me to his beach house. When I complained to the marketing manager about how inappropriate that was, he laughed and said, "That man can't even get it up." This company produced and sold genetically modified corn. There were too many sacks, so the company stored them in a deposit in a field about 15 feet from the office. When the annual fiscal audit came, my boss worried he would have to take the auditors there. I asked if it was because the tax declaration was inaccurate. He said no, it was because the place was infested with huge rats. I suggested cats. He said, "We did. The rats killed the cat." I later asked one of the agronomic engineers if the rat situation could be that bad. He laughed and walked away. There was a woman who did the bare minimum and acted like a stereotypical Karen. She developed a herpes lesion near her eye and went to a natural healer instead of a doctor. The healer scrubbed the lesion with a live frog. Outside the window there was a beautiful bush. I asked an agronomic engineer what it was. With a straight face he said, "That's an ivy." I said, "That's literally a bush." He turned bright red and replied, "Good, I was testing you," and walked away. I could go on, but you get the idea. Story 31. Yes, I worked for a church where he was the senior pastor. He had no filter, and his personal morality was questionable to everyone else. He would say to the secretary, "I don't think you and your husband should be together in the upcoming pictorial directory photos, since you are probably going to get a divorce." She was fighting hard for her marriage. If he did not get his way during a meeting, he would go straight to stereotypical Christian phrases such as, "What is God going to say when we get to heaven and we did not let the charismatic church use our building for services?" They were known to stage faith healings and similar events. He would put his hands on every young girl's shoulders and flirt with every older woman, despite being in his mid-40s. He was fired for cheating on his wife. Story 32. Here are the most relevant examples. He is a dentist. Once he bought a mini basketball net and installed it in the staff room. He was so excited that he pretended a patient's tooth had miraculously repaired itself, sent her home, and took an hour to play alone between the dental chair and our bags. He hired a company to manage his staff and develop strategies to increase revenue. Each time the consultants came, he spent the meeting interrupting them, boasting about how good he was and saying he knew better than they did, which was not true. As an exercise for the management company, everyone took a personality test labeling us leader, sociable, intellectual, and so on. He was so upset that my results matched his ideal that he retook the test repeatedly, changing his answers until his leader score matched our boss's. I worked there 4 years and have many stories. I used to call him Michael Scott because it was the same. Story 33. My experience was less entertaining than Michael's, but we compared him in the following ways. He only hired people he would have a beer with. He was grossly underqualified to manage, but he was good at sales, so he was promoted. He made really awkward, distasteful comments. For example, he asked an employee if he and his twin brother shared a girlfriend. He held wasteful, pointless meetings. No one knew how he spent his days. His assistant manager did all the heavy lifting while he wandered around making small talk. He showed up to a meeting with his superiors having done no preparation, and they removed him from the meeting. He was actually fired after he referred to the coronavirus as Kung Flu to a Chinese employee in March. That was likely the most serious incident. He had worked there for 8 years and had many notes on his file. This was the one that pushed it over the edge. Story 34. I once had a boss who behaved as if he had watched The Office and treated it like a documentary, applying Michael Scott's management lessons. He decided we were missing deadlines because our checklist was wrong. He had no experience in our field and did not know what was needed. The real problem was severe understaffing, but he was convinced and could not be talked out of it. I redid the checklist, keeping the same layout but changing the order of the items. He did not realize I had changed the order and said no, it's not right. So I reverted to the original version and put the checkboxes on the left instead of the right. That was literally all I did. Apparently it was perfect and we would see an improvement in our timeframes because of his idea to fix the checklist. Sigh. Story 35. Kieran. He went to Germany and rented a car. He did not know how to drive in Germany and hit 8 cars in the rental lot. He asked me to use my company credit card to pay the insurance premium. I refused. We had many communication problems, largely because he did not respect me as a woman. Human Resources recommended we have Monday morning one-on-one meetings. He never showed up for them. I kept a record. He complained to Human Resources that we were not having the meetings, even though he did not attend them. He said that the woman who was stuck on a project with him could receive a free item worth up to $500. She chose a PlayStation. When my company purchase was questioned, he refused to confirm that he had authorized the transaction and tried to get me fired because he was tired of me calling him out. I handled his wife's resume and her application to the Department of Motor Vehicles, his mortgage papers, his insurance papers, and his family's passports, all tasks beyond my job scope. Human Resources instructed him to assign me only work-related tasks, and he told me never to speak to Human Resources again, saying he was the boss and I should do what he said. He stood with his peer executives, all of whom I supported. While the other 3 greeted me, he deliberately ignored me. The irony is that he volunteered me for many tasks I excelled at, and I advanced while he did not. It turned out that the protection he had while his brother was chief information officer disappeared when his brother left the company. He transferred out of information technology and became a problem for the engineering department before I left the company. At a company Christmas party, he bet the department that we could not climb the rock wall faster than him. He ended up severely spraining his ankle and refused to pay the $100 bet. Another manager organized a raffle to boost morale. I won an iPad and some gift cards. The manager who organized the raffle also won the iPad and kept it. None of us could believe it. Story 36. He wasn't really like Michael Scott, but he definitely believed he had a great handle on every aspect of the store. I worked in the print marketing and graphic design department, and he would always come around trying to give Photoshop tips and similar advice. Photoshop was basically the only program he really knew. I had a regular, very nice preacher who would come in a couple of times a month to print small event flyers. He always had a print-ready image and asked for a certain number of quarter-sheet flyers cut to size and a certain number of full-sheet flyers. Of course, I would open Microsoft Publisher, print, cut, and get him out the door in just a few minutes. One day, I was going on my lunch break, and as I was walking out, I saw him walking in. The manager assured me he would have it taken care of. 30 minutes later, I was back, and I had never seen the preacher show a hint of anger, but there he was, fuming. He said, "Thank God you're back. I really need to get going. He doesn't know what the hell he's doing." I went to the computer and there he was, the image open in Photoshop on a full sheet canvas, trying to precisely shift 4 copies of the image into place using guides. You can do that, but it takes a little longer. I didn't ask questions. I immediately took over and got the customer on his way. The manager was appropriately humbled and even came back later so I could show him what to do. Story 37. I had a short-term computer programming job working for a guy named Art who was a Michael Scott. He was a genuinely nice person, but totally obnoxious to everyone around him. He had no filter. Whatever thought came into his head came out of his mouth. This was in the days when you could smoke in your office, and he went through several packs a day. Meetings in his office were hellish. At one point, we had to travel to a branch location together. The company leased a two-bedroom apartment in the branch town for headquarters employees. This meant that during the one-week trip, Art and I would be together 24 hours a day. While preparing for the trip, I took solace in the fact that at least we would sit separately on the 3-hour flight, because you could smoke on planes then and Art was sure to light up every 10 minutes. As we got to the gate, I said, "I'll see you when we land." "Oh, we're sitting together," said Art. "Art, I can't sit in a smoking section for a 3-hour flight." "Oh, I don't smoke on the plane. We have seats next to each other in the non-smoking section." My week in hell had begun. Story 38. I had a terrible boss and want to share one of many stories. I had to write after-action reports for what were essentially administrative decision meetings. Usually, once a month, there would be 4 to 5 of these meetings in a week. It was simple. The report came on a standard form. Fill out the header, check some boxes, write a summary, and bring it to the boss for signature. There was a 3-day window in which any party to the meeting could file a formal appeal, which I never saw happen. The boss could not decide whether he wanted the after-action reports dated on the date of the meeting or 3 days later, when the appeal window closed. One day I brought him a stack, each in an individual folder, and went about my business. 15 minutes later, he called me back. He was waiting in his chair with the stack of reports and began, "I don't know how many times I have to tell you how I want these." He spent the next minute berating me for not getting the date right while he opened each folder, took the report out, dropped it on the floor, and threw the empty folders at my chest. At the end of his tirade, he said, "Now pick this up and get out of my office." Story 39. I have been lucky and had fairly good bosses. My worst boss was at a large technology company. He was a network engineer who had been promoted to management and did not know how to manage. Usually that was okay. He would approve vacations and let people do their jobs. The main annoyance was that he was a network engineer and I was a Windows Server engineer. Whenever customers asked us to do something impossible or something that would actively harm them, he left me to defend the company's position. If the network team pushed back, he would jump in to defend them and act as the point of contact he was supposed to be. He also did not understand much of what I did, so his measure of whether I was doing a good job was whether I was at my desk. The network team could work from home whenever they wanted. If I worked from home more than once in a 2-week period, he would send me emails about how important it was to be in the office. I ended up getting fired for working from home when I was sick. I had a project due, so I was trying to get it done while ill. I faxed him the doctor's note saying I was allowed to be off for the rest of the week, then logged in and started to work. He said since I was working, I had to be in the office. I ignored him. The next Friday, he had me meet with him at 8 a.m. I showed up and Human Resources was sitting there to walk me out. The most Michael Scott thing he did was schedule a 2-hour team meeting every Friday during football season for fantasy football. If team members did not want to play, he said they would have to go back to work instead of just hanging out. I ended up drafting only players from the Miami Dolphins so I could sit and talk with everyone. Several people randomly picked players and never traded. One person went back to work and did not attend any of the meetings. Story 40. I wish I could remember more, but I have blocked most of it out. 1. He told us he invented Apple computers before Steve Jobs and claimed the computer he invented is still more powerful than any other computer. 2. He threw knives in the air and said if you could catch them, he would give you money. That incident was at a Christmas party. I was not there, but I believe it. 3. He came to work wearing only leopard print underwear and a pink cowboy hat. He is about 70 years old. I was there for that one. 4. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder but said it was not the bad kind, rather the kind that makes you super smart. 5. He got drunk at work and gave alcohol to anyone who would take it. He needs to be institutionalized, but he is wealthy so he gets away with everything, and everyone is afraid of him. Story 41. Not sure how in a Michael Scott way this is, but I had a boss who was a complete screw-up. She would get caught messing up, blame me, yell and curse at me, later realize it was her fault, and then want to take me out for a private one-on-one lunch as an apology. After a while, I started telling her, "Thanks, but I have plans already." She was too tone-deaf to realize that an employee does not want to spend their break eating with their manager after being yelled at and embarrassed in front of colleagues for no good reason. Note to those saying she was still a good boss because she apologized and offered free food. Did you miss the part about the yelling and cursing? There were plenty of other things she did that did not indicate good leadership. Story 42. Yes. He'd never admit it, though. He swears he's a gym. Edited to add, do I need to be liked? Absolutely not. I like to be liked. I enjoy being liked. I have to be liked. But it is not a compulsive need to be liked, like my need to be praised. Pretty sure this is the mantra my boss lives by. Story 43. My boss is like Michael Scott in the bad ways. She thinks she's friends with everyone and believes she's really cool, but is actually super lame. She constantly distracts people from their work and calls frequent meetings with no purpose or direction. Story 44. I believe every manager has had a Michael Scott or David Brent moment. That is what makes it so hard to watch at times. My worst was telling someone they had been offered a job in a warehouse, then realizing I had told the wrong person and having to tell him 30 minutes later that he did not have the job. Dreadful. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.